Welcome back to our IGCSE Biology Revision Series. Today we are exploring Chapter 10, Diseases and Immunity. Every day, your body is under attack by millions of microscopic invaders. Yet most of the time you don't even notice. How does your body protect itself? What happens when those defenses fall? And how has understanding immunity revolutionized medicine? By the end of this video, you will understand pathogens, disease transmission, your body's incredible defense systems, and how vaccines work. Let's dive in. First, let's define our enemy. A pathogen is a disease-causing organism. Pathogens include bacteria, viruses, fungi, and protists. When a pathogen successfully invades your body and reproduces, you develop a disease. A transmissible disease is one where the pathogen can be passed from one host to another. These diseases can be spread through populations, making them particularly dangerous from a public health perspective. Pathogens transmit in two main ways, either by direct contact or by indirect contact. We will explore both of them in the next slide. As we discussed previously, pathogens spread in two main ways, either by direct contact or indirect transmission. In direct contact, there are three main ways, either through blood, sexual contact, and physical contact. Pathogens transfer through blood either by sharing needles, blood transfusions, or mother to fetus across the placenta. Sexual contact is through body fluids during intercourse. Physical contact is when touching infected individuals, for examples in diseases like athlete's foot. Lastly, the pathogens can also be transmitted through breast milk from mother to baby. Now let's talk about indirect transmission, where pathogens transfer from contaminated surfaces, food, or water, or by airborne transmission. Pathogens might be surviving on door handles, tables, etc. And sometimes it can also transfer when the food is not cooked properly or the drinking water is not clean. Airborne transmission is through breathing in droplets from coughs and sneezes. Vector transmission is by animals carrying these pathogens, like mosquitoes spreading malaria. Your body has multiple layers of defense to prevent pathogens from causing infection. These are your first line of defense against disease. There are physical barriers and chemical barriers. The first physical barrier is your skin. The skin acts as a physical barrier. Its outer layer of dead cells is difficult for pathogens to penetrate. Skin also produces oils and sweat that contain antimicrobial chemicals. The next is the hairs in the nose. Tiny hairs called cilia trap particles and pathogens from the air you breathe, preventing them from entering the lungs. Third is the mucus. Mucus is a sticky substance produced by the cells lining the respiratory passages. It traps pathogens and dust particles. Cilia then sweep the mucus up toward the throat, where it can be swallowed or expelled. One of the chemical barriers is the stomach acid. The stomach produces hydrochloric acid, creating an extremely acidic environment, about pH 1 or 2. Most pathogens that are swallowed with food or in mucus are killed by this acid. The last hope of the immune system is the white blood cells. If pathogens manage to get past these barriers, white blood cells provide the body's internal defense. We will explore these in detail shortly. Now let's explore how to prevent disease spread. Beyond individual body defenses, society implements measures to control disease spread. These public health interventions have saved millions of lives. First up, we have the clean water supply, providing treated, uncontaminated drinking water prevents waterborne diseases like cholera and typhoid. Water treatment removes pathogens through filtration and chlorination. Second is the hygienic food preparation. Cooking food thoroughly kills most pathogens. Refrigerating food slows bacterial growth, preventing cross-contamination between raw and cooked foods. Washing hands before food preparation. Regular cleaning of food preparation surfaces. Third is to procure good personal hygiene. By regularly washing hands with soap, especially after using the toilet and before eating, covering mouth when coughing or sneezing, using tissues and disposing of them properly, and not sharing personal items like toothbrush and towels. Fourth is the waste disposal. Proper collection and disposal of household waste prevents it from attracting disease-carrying pests like rats and flies. Fifth is the sewage treatment. Treating sewage before releasing it into the environment prevents contamination of water supplies. Sewage treatment plants use biological and chemical processes to remove pathogens and harmful substances. These measures explain why infectious diseases are much less common in countries with good sanitation infrastructure. Now let's look at a specific disease example. Cholera is an excellent example of a transmissible disease. Let's examine it in detail, as required by the syllabus. What is cholera? Cholera is a disease caused by the bacterium Vibrio cholerae, which is transmitted in contaminated water. How cholera works? Let's explore the mechanism. When contaminated water or food is ingested, that means swallowed, the cholera bacteria enters the small intestine. The bacteria attach to the wall of the small intestine, then produces a toxin. This toxin causes something crucial to happen. Let's break it down. The toxin stimulates cells lining the intestine to secrete chloride ions from the inside of cells into the lumen of the small intestine. Chloride ions accumulate in the intestinal lumen. This increases the concentration of ions in the lumen, which lowers the water potential. Because the water potential in the intestine lumen is now lower than the inside of the cells, water moves by osmosis from the cells into the lumen. Large quantities of water accumulate in the intestine. This causes severe diarrhea, large volume of watery feces, or dehydration, excessive water loss from the body, or loss of ions from the blood, particularly chloride ions and sodium ions, low blood pressure, and potential organ failure. Without treatment, death can occur within hours. So, what's the treatment? It is known as the oral rehydration therapy, where you replace lost water and ions with special salt sugar solutions, and using intravenous fluids in severe cases. Sometimes antibiotics help to kill the bacteria. Some prevention include clean water supply, proper sewage treatment, good food hygiene, and washing hands regularly. Now let's explore how your immune system fights back when pathogens enter the body. White blood cells are the key defenders. Let's understand two key terms before we dive in: antigens and antibodies. Antigens are proteins found on the surface of all cells, including pathogen cells. Each type of pathogen has unique antigens. Think of them as identification tags. Antibodies are proteins produced by the white blood cells that bind to specific antigens. They have a Y shape with binding sites that are complementary to specific antigens. As we talked about antibodies, let's understand a concept of antibody specificity. This concept is similar to the enzyme-substrate complex, which are complementary to each other. This is crucial. Specific antibodies have complementary shapes which fit specific antigens, just like the lock and key. An antibody for measles virus won't work against the flu virus because the antigens are different. There are two main types of white blood cells: phagocytes and lymphocytes. Phagocytes perform phagocytosis. They recognize pathogens, often marked by the antibodies, and they engulf the pathogen, surrounding it with their cell membrane. The pathogen is taken into the cell in a vesicle. Enzymes are released that digest and destroy the pathogens. The waste products are then expelled. This is a non-specific response. Phagocytes will attack any pathogen they encounter. The second type of white blood cells is the lymphocytes, the antibody producers. They provide a specific response. They detect specific antigens on pathogens and produce specific antibodies complementary to those antigens. Antibodies are released into the blood plasma. What do antibodies do? Antibody works in several ways. They are bind to the antigens on pathogen surfaces, marking them for destruction, or they clump together the pathogens in a process called agglutination, making them easier targets for phagocytes. They directly neutralize toxins produced by the bacteria and make the pathogens easier to engulf by phagocytes. The result: antibodies lead to the direct destruction of pathogens or marking of pathogens for destruction by phagocytes. Now we come to a crucial concept: immunity. There are two types you need to understand: active immunity and passive immunity. Let's deal with the active immunity first. Active immunity is a defense against a pathogen by antibody production in the body. It's called active because your body actively produces these antibodies. Active immunity can be gained in two ways. The first way is natural active immunity, that is, after you're getting naturally infected by the pathogen itself. When you are infected with a pathogen, the lymphocytes detect the pathogen's antigens. They produce specific antibodies, and the pathogen is destroyed. But crucially, some lymphocytes remain as memory cells to provide long-term immunity. Memory cells stay in the body for many years, sometimes for life. If the same pathogen enters the body again, the memory cells recognize the antigens immediately, producing antibodies much faster than the first time. The pathogen is then destroyed before you become ill, and that is why you usually only get diseases like chickenpox once. The second way is through vaccination, also known as artificial active immunity. How do vaccines work? A vaccine contains a harmless form of a pathogen. This could be dead pathogens, weakened live pathogens, or parts of pathogens like just the antigens, or toxins which are made harmless. When vaccinated, the harmless pathogen or antigen is injected. Your lymphocytes detect the foreign antigens and produce specific antibodies against them. The harmless pathogen is destroyed, and memory cells are produced and remain in the body. If you are later exposed to the same antigen, memory cells respond rapidly, and you will not become ill because the pathogen is destroyed so quickly. The benefits of vaccination is that it provides immunity without suffering the disease. It protects individuals and creates herd immunity in populations. When enough people are vaccinated, the disease cannot spread easily, protecting even unvaccinated individuals. Now moving on to passive immunity. Passive immunity is a short-term defense against a pathogen by antibodies acquired from another individual. It's called passive because your body doesn't produce the antibodies. They come from someone else. Let's understand how passive immunity occurs. It occurs either through the placenta. During pregnancy, antibodies from the mother to fetus through the placenta, providing protection to the unborn baby, or by breast milk. Breast milk, especially the first milk, contains antibodies that provide protection to the newborn. Breastfeeding is crucial for infants because newborns have immature immune systems. Breast milk provides ready-made antibodies, often immediate protection against diseases, and helps protect babies during the first few months of life, while their own immune system develops. This passive immunity is temporary because no memory cells are produced, but it's vital for newborn survival. Now let's examine an important category of transmissible diseases, sexually transmitted infections, or known as STIs. What is an STI? An STI is an infection that is transmitted through sexual contact. HIV is a very common example, also known as human immunodeficiency virus. HIV is a pathogen that causes an STI. It's important to understand that HIV is the virus, and it may lead to a disease called AIDS. HIV infection may lead to AIDS, also known as acquired immune deficiency syndrome. Let's understand the difference. HIV is the virus itself. AIDS is a collection of symptoms and diseases that result from the damage HIV does to the immune system. You can be HIV positive for years without having AIDS. How HIV works. HIV is particularly dangerous because of how it attacks. HIV first infects the specific types of lymphocytes, and the virus uses the lymphocytes machinery to replicate itself. This process destroys the infected lymphocytes. Over time, the number of functional lymphocytes decreases, causing the immune system to progressively become weaker. Eventually, the body cannot fight off infections that would normally be harmless. When the immune system is severely damaged, the person has AIDS. They become vulnerable to opportunistic infections like tuberculosis, pneumonia, rare cancers, and other infections that a healthy human system that would easily defeat. Often, AIDS patients die from these secondary infections than the HIV itself. Now let's understand how HIV transmits. HIV is transmitted through direct exchange of body fluids. Some examples include unprotected sexual intercourse with an infected person, or sharing needles, particularly among intravenous drug users, and blood transfusions with contaminated blood, or mother to child, across the placenta during pregnancy, during childbirth, or through breast milk. Important: HIV is not spread by touching or hugging, sharing utensils, coughing or sneezing, swimming pools, or insect bites. How to control the spread of STIs, including HIV? First is the barrier protection by using condoms during sexual intercourse and limiting the number of sexual partners and getting regularly tested if you have had unprotected sex. The fourth way is to screen blood donations for HIV and using sterilized needles in medical settings and avoid needle sharing. HIV positive mothers can take drugs to reduce the transmission risk, may be advised not to breastfeed, and by education, teaching people about these transmission methods and prevention, and using sterilized surgical equipments properly. The treatment: while there is no cure for HIV, antiretroviral drugs can slow down the virus replication or keep the viral load very low, allows HIV positive people to live near normal lifespans, and reduces transmission risks. And that's chapter 10, Diseases and Immunity. We have covered pathogens and transmissible diseases, how they spread, body defenses including physical barriers and white blood cells, the detailed cholera case study, the immune response with antibodies and antigens, active and passive immunity, vaccination, and sexually transmitted infections including AIDS and HIV. Remember the big picture. Your immune system is incredibly sophisticated, with multiple layers of defense. The specificity of antibodies and the long-term protection from memory cells are what makes immunity possible. Vaccines harness this natural system to protect us without the risk of actual infection. In the next slide, you can view some practice questions so you stay focused and keep the concepts fresh in memory. If you found this lesson helpful, kindly click the like button and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more IGCSE revision videos. Until next time, see you soon.